So this was an area of concern in reaching out to different landlords and folks that were had this concern. We agreed to put more language in there. So for those who are unfamiliar with the section Councilor Rudd's speaking about, it's about the high priority areas versus the rest of the city regarding the lead ordinance. And the Rochester legislation said it was the mayor and the mayor's designee who decided where the high priority areas were. We kind of mimicked that in our initial legislation, but we've altered that, I believe, to say that a change in the high priority areas in the future for the Syracuse legislation would be based on the mayor's suggestion, approval of the council, and also a seeker. I believe that's an edit that we've made between the last committee meetings we had and this new introduction. Patrick, is that, do I have that accurate? Do you want to, can you pull up the section that has it?
Sure thing. Good morning, councilors. So we've included a definition of the high risk areas, which can be found in the definition section. And in that, we're just trying to give a better idea of what these high risk areas are, because there seems to be a concern about changing them. Additionally, in section 54.6.
Okay, so hang on, you said it's in the, so I went to the definition section and then I went alphabetical to high risk, and I see HEPA vacuum and I see impact surface, but I don't see high risk. So what am I missing?
You might be looking at a former version of the document. I'm looking at the most recent draft. I'm not sure if the most recent draft made it out to everybody. I'd be happy to send it to you. Yeah, but I can read out the definition we currently have.
So let's just 1 second. Is there an earlier draft that I'm over, or a more recent draft that I'm overlooking? The one that I opened was, and Councilor Allen has joined, so I will defer to her to run this show as she wants. But I opened it from the version Joe sent on 6.9. So what version should the councilors have that?
I'm looking at a version from 6.22.
Oh, from Catherine Carnwright. Yes. Okay.
Yes, that was I believe introduced last Friday with some
options. Okay, sorry. I just Googled. I looked it up by looking up for Joe Barry. That's why I.
Oh, that's okay.
But okay, so now when I go to, okay, let me find it. But sorry, you can. I interrupted you. You can continue if you want.
Oh, that's fine. So we included a definition of the high risk areas. Again, and in the definition, it's largely pulled from the changes we made in section 54.6, which is where we discuss inspections for violations. So the high risk areas are ones identified by the mayor or the mayor's designee and approved by the Common Council after a public hearing in accordance with any applicable environmental review process. It shall be based on relevant factors. We list the various factors that we would consider relevant, and that the determination is going to be data driven. And so we're trying to show that this isn't going to be some sort of arbitrary process of designating areas as high risk, but fact-based, scientifically, and
just because you say fact-based, scientific, data-driven, if it doesn't give specific data points and measures, then it is arbitrary and open to interpretation, right?
I would disagree, but again, it is subject to the Common Council after a public hearing. So if you were to determine, councilor, that you thought it was an arbitrary designation, then you would have the power to object to it.
So, Councilor Rudd, are you asking that you want the language to be more specific?
Honestly, still struggling to find the definition section in this seemingly larger document. There's not page numbers, but I'm saying before it just said mayoral approval, so now it seems like it might say mayor and council, which is better.
Correct.
But I also think if we're gonna I just think to say just data driven is like, you might as well not say data driven. Like, it just, if we're gonna be specific, it should be specific like to the incidence of, based on data related to the lead exposure levels from county blood testing, or based on like those kind of poverty rates, something based on something more specific.
I agree with you, right? Because if not, it leaves a kind of a loophole, so to speak, because it's too vague.
Noted, counselors. I will note, though, that in the high-risk areas definition, we do cite that one of the relevant factors we'd be looking to is the county health department inspections data in conjunction with the county's elevated blood level inspections.
Okay.
Were you able to locate it, Councilor Rudd?
No, were you?
No, I'm still looking right now. Do you have a page number?
Yeah, do you have it pulled up, Patrick? Could you?
Yeah, I've got it pulled up. I can tell you the high risk area is on page 5.
Maybe you could share your screen.
That's what I was gonna ask. Can you share?
Sure thing. Give me a moment.
Michael, could you send us the up-to-date? Michael?
Sorry, I keep talking with the mic off. I am looking at the one that came through on June 26th from Joe Barry, Councilor Driscoll. That's the same one you're working off of, correct?
Yes, that would be the most recent, I believe.
Okay.
Maybe just email us it.
Yep, absolutely happy to.
Time while they he's gonna share his screen. Did we have any other questions? I'm sure there'll be more questions once the screen comes up, but were there any other specific questions from the other counselors?
Were there any other questions, Councilor Rudd or Hogan? Any other concerns you guys had around besides this?
So I find the high risk area thing, I'll have to like kind of read it while we're talking. But my other set of questions is really related just to the implement. So we can see what other people have too, but what the implementation of codes. So it's probably for Michael Collins based on who I see on the call, but just the feed, like this law is very prescriptive in like how to wipe a window. Like you fold and you then swipe and then you fold and then you insert into the whatever and do what. It's very descriptive in that way, which makes it sound like we've got it all figured out. But at the same time, just like how are we actually going to do all this? How does it fit in with the existing structure? How are we going to overcome the existing challenges while adding this new level? And that's the part that I am most concerned about and haven't felt that we're going to be like, we can make the law, but it doesn't mean it's going to actually all get implemented. So that's my main concern.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilor.
No, I was just going to say that we have Michael can speak to the details, but we've definitely discussed at the earliest an implementation of October, so that we can take the time to really reevaluate best practices and kind of work together. And Michael, Jake, Michelle, and I have been in talks about how we develop both the capacity and the protocol to implement this correctly. But I'll let Michael get into.
So I would also add, just for comparison, that 2.5 years ago, somewhere in that window, we passed a revised rental registry that does interior inspections. Like, how many interior inspections have we done over the last 2 years? And how does that compare to what we had done before? Like very basic information, I would say we don't have, and to the extent we've seen it, it shows that we don't actually enforce the rental registry. And I see this as building onto that. It's saying rental registry does an exterior inspection, we do an interior inspection. We're going to add as part of the rental registry, essentially, a lead inspection, which is all the more intensive, and you have to actually be in the home. So how is it actually going to happen?
So from an implementation standpoint, this has been based on the fact that we really borrowed heavily from Rochester and talked with them a lot, as you're all aware from the presentation that we had on this, the public meeting that we had on this. And what we've learned is that it adds about 10 to 15 minutes to an inspection. So from a time standpoint, there's it's quantifiable, it's doable. From an overall work standpoint, what we had put in the budget was that we would have a
how many interior inspections did you do last year? And what time did they take? You said it adds 10 minutes. So are we going from 10 minutes to 20? Are we going from 60 minutes to 70? How many did you do? Or did
wasn't here last year, so that's not fresh. That's not something that I've got for you right now, Counselor.
Okay, so you don't know how many interior inspections we did the last year. I realize you weren't here, but
I don't, but I can absolutely get that for you. What I'm saying is,
you don't know, but you know that the 10 minutes times whatever that number is totally feasible.
It is when we are fully staffed. So that's why what was built into last year's budget was, or to the budget that was just passed, is 2 additional inspectors and one person to manage a lead program coordinator position. So with that, yes, that fits into the expected and additional workload.
Okay, so I'm just going to say it again because it sounds similar to me, but so 10 minutes times a number, we have no idea what it is, but fully staffed with 2 more people and a lead coordinator, we'll be able to do that number for sure, even though we don't know what the number is.
When we say we don't know what the number is, I don't know what the number is. Certainly, Ken, for all the time that he's put into this, Ken does know what the number is.
All I'm saying is that to not know the number, then we don't know the other answers that you're saying we know. To me, it seems, but maybe I'm just being a hard ass. I will let other counselors ask for a moment, and I'll do a little Buddha breathing.
Counselors, I'm ready to pull up that part if you'd like.
Yes, please. Are you all set?
Yeah, I'm just figuring it out. Okay, so do you see I've highlighted the high risk area, and this is in the definition section.
So in this case,
document, sorry.
So when it says the mayor's designee, would that be somebody from the codes department?
That's my understanding, correct? Like the director.
Okay.
So Patrick, would the council be aware of exactly what risk area would be the priority as far as that goes when this is implemented? Where you're going to be, in other words?
That would be my understanding, correct?
Before that you would implement the actual testing?
So the high risk area requires the dust swipes in addition to the visual inspection. And so the area being designated would be determined by the mayor, the mayor's designee, so likely the director of codes. They would come to the Common Council indicating this is what we have found and believe should be the high risk area. That is subject to Common Council approval. And additionally, any applicable environmental review process. And so that's that's what we would have to do in order to make a high-risk area. And in the future, any changes to the high-risk area would go through that same process.
So I would envision that Councilor Allen's committee would be informed prior to anything. The standing committee would be informed prior to any actual testing, right?
That's a little beyond what my knowledge base is, but I can ask Joe.
Well, Michael, you could do that, right?
Yeah, so Counselor, just make sure that it goes through the committee. I think it would have to go through the committee because of the fact that approval would be needed by the Common Council.
Every time they do testing, there would be an approval?
Not every time they do testing, it would be every time, perhaps I misunderstood the question. Every time that there would be, and this would not be common at all, but a desire to change the focus area.
Okay.
That has to go through Common Council, so that would, of course, come through committee.
I think it'd be particularly important to let, especially the district councilor knows where this actual activity is happening every time they change a focus area.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think what what we want to do here is make sure that we're building a policy that is gives us the ability to get this problem under control in the areas in which it's most intense. As we do that, we recognize that those areas over time may shift. So we should have an ordinance that is both present and forward thinking, but it's not just at the whims of whoever happens to be mayor. And so that's why we've got both bodies involved in that.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, and Patrick, I do believe if I don't know, maybe Patrick could help point us to, but what area it is. But the high risk areas have been identified as of now. As you know, as we implement this ordinance, we do have the high risk areas identified that we would be designating. So, and as the legislation lays out, any changes to that would be require both bodies and data in order to change what the high designated area would be.
Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with what the high risk area is, but I was more involved in the operational, how it would operate in the future.
Yeah, it's in the seeker. If or the EIS, I read. If folks want to get a map, I can send that to them.
Just on the law, I need the version, the current version, because I have the 6.9 version from Joe Barry, and then I have a lead abatement, the seeker findings on 626 from Joe Barry, but I don't have an updated version of the lead abatement control with the language that Patrick's showing.
I just sent it to your Gmail, Tim, Timothy Mark Rudd at Gmail.
Councilors, did the email I sent come through?
No, Michael, I didn't get it.
Patrick, did you get mine?
Yeah, I got you.
Let me check. I have logged out of my email because I wasn't sure what would be shown when I share my screen.
It should be.
I got the email from you, Joe. Just go to my Gmail. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it should be in there for everybody. And apologies, it wasn't. I wasn't sure if it had been sent out to the rest of the council. Apology. I should have made sure of that. But it did only arrive. What was it, Friday or something? So I thought it had been sent out previously. But
I just got it in my Gmail, Counselor.
yeah, I had assumed it had been sent out. I should have double checked on that. But yeah, it's only been the updated version only arrived on Friday, so it's only been in existence for a few days.
I will say having it on a screen that I can actually read it, and it seems fine to me. Revised.
And so with both, we included it in both in the definition section and section 54.6, just to try and be very clear of what a high risk area designation process would take.
And Councilor Rudd, we can have another committee meeting or more conversations regarding your questions to implementation. I definitely think similar to the, I concur with your assessment about the interior inspections that we passed, and I don't think we're firing on all cylinders currently, and I think this legislation will only be as effective as the implementation. So I think this is more the starting line than the finish line for this legislation. I think that like it's great to make the rules, but we obviously have to continue to look at the data and look at our best practices, try to figure out how we implement it so it has the effect that in Rochester, the cases decreased at a rate 2.5 times of their state partners. While we did see lead decrease throughout the state, Rochester's implementation saw a 2.5 times the rate increase in lead reduction. So that's down to implementation, though. So we will have a lot of work to do after this, and I think your questions are good ones that we should be asking.
I just have one anecdote that might not totally be perfect, but in my first job after graduate school, it was in a budget office, and I would always I would spend all this time doing something, and then you have a meeting with like a big important person, and I'd want to show everything. And eventually my boss said, sometimes if you want to make point D, you don't need to say, hey, look, ABC equals D. And like, you can just say D, and the people will either ask, how did you get to D, or did you do A, or did you do C, or did you do B? And if you have it, then they come to believe you, and they believe that in your conclusions, so you don't need to present it. They know you do good work, and they know it's there if they need to ask. And I would say with whatever cast of characters has been in place related to codes, I have learned the opposite. I have learned that we present like D, and there's never A, there's never B, and there's never C. And whenever I ask, it's disheartening or delusional or disappointing. And I just think we can pretend everything is okay. We can close our eyes and march forward, and a couple years from now, we'll wonder why it didn't work. Or we can be realistic, and we need to start doing the backup proactively. And it shouldn't be the council, after things are all set up, asking the questions that make sense to make it achievable. Like, these have to be things that we as a city start to do across the board, especially in housing. And it's just, I don't think it's happening now, and I'm not confident it's going to happen. But yeah, we can hold committee meetings and talk about how we're not set up and have people not ignore it because of the planning fallacy. But I'm just very concerned that it's just not going to work the way we think.
Councilor, it's all right. Can I just jump in real quick to go off of Tim's point? And Michael, I know you weren't here for it, so and neither is Jake, right? So it's been new for you guys. But I will say, even since my time on the council, the pattern is that whenever we got a presentation from codes, it was always an explanation as to why they weren't able to achieve the last things that they've been trying to do for the last year. And I just do think going forward, from the council's perspective, I want to know in real time if we're off the trend line of what we need to do for inspections or anything like that. Let us know immediately so we can try to give you resources or try to prioritize it, rather than this retrospective. For the last year, we haven't been doing what we wanted to do, but here's our plan going forward. Because to Tim's point, there was always a plan to how to fix it, and then that never happened. And we just got the retrospective for the last year. We weren't doing what we wanted to do. So I just do think it is important from a communication standpoint. If, for example, if we don't have enough inspectors to do this, let us know immediately so we can try to fix it.
So, Councilor Green, I appreciate that. So a few things to that point. One is, as Councilor Driscoll can attest to, the wide range of experts were pulled into this, and to the one point that seems to be missing about number of inspections. When I say missing, it's because I myself don't have that personal piece of data, but I am getting it for you. Secondly, Jake's been in place for a week, and we've seen what he's done with within permits. So we certainly expect that he's going to be performing at a high level and have the team doing the same thing there. Thirdly, to the point of how many people we need, as we said at the beginning of this meeting and was discussed at the budget hearing, this to get this implemented, there are 3 specific positions that we need to hire: 2 more or 2 more housing inspectors, and the person to administer the program. So what we've talked about is making sure that we've got an implementation date that is at the beginning of Q4, calendar year Q4. So we would be able to make sure that we did have it in place, or if not, we're able to, it's because of budgetary reasons for which we're all discussing.
Can I ask a question, Commissioner?
Please, I'm all yours.
Okay, so can you, for the record, can we go back, because I've been on the council almost 8 years, and the more we're talking, every year they came through from codes from previous administrations, and every year, to both councilors' point, they always needed these folks. We put it in place. So what happened to that, or is it outdated now?
So, Counselor, I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Could you say that again?
Can we go back and see how many people we've added? Because previous years, going all the way back, every year when we were presented from a codes perspective, they always needed more people. So from that period, how many people have we added, or is it just outdated and we're still not catching up?
So I will absolutely look at that. I think the other thing to factor in for why we expect that things are going to be different is the fact that we've implemented the geographic allocations. So we actually have a very different approach to how we're doing the work. But I'd be happy to get that for you, Council President.
Okay.
And Commissioner, just the other, not to be too hard, but one of the things we always hear would be, oh, well, people retired, or, you know, we had trouble finding people. So we just want to make sure you're taking into account the fact that sometimes people retire, or that it takes a while to hire people when you consider what the headcount needs to be.
Yeah, well, totally understand. We have 3 vacant, currently vacant positions besides the 2 additional ones because we've not been able to onboard due to COVID, and now as we're doing the financial planning for what the financial contingency planning might have to look like. We've continued to hold those open just to be fiscally prudent.
And I would just take this moment to, obviously my fellow counselors are aware, but, well, not to go off on too much of a rant, but Congressman Katko said the city of Syracuse needed to, have support from the federal government closing its budget gap. They've advocated that the state of New York needs federal assistance helping its budget gap. And I'd just like to relay again, if we don't get that, if we're unhappy with how things are functioning at the moment, we're going to be a lot more unhappy in a year when we have to make 20, 30, 40% cuts across the board to every department in city government, which the federal government, to my knowledge, hasn't said a word about what their plan is. And they just reported, great economic growth while we're looking at the highest unemployment numbers since the Great Depression. So I'm a little flustered with state of affairs from our federal government. And as we hear from constituents, it's going to be us who take the brunt of this if our federal representatives don't step up and figure out how we don't face 20, 30% cuts across the board in every department. Because this program is going to take more funding and more resources. Codes already needs more resources, and it's going to need even more resources to implement this. And if we cut 20 to 30%, obviously that makes all of this kind of moot.
The last point I want to make about this is that this is, as one of the public commenters in the public meeting said, this is a racial justice issue. And so we as a department understand the importance of the fact that this needs to happen. And to, as we've all discussed, and to Councilor Disco's point, this can only happen with the financial support. But we have a very obvious segregation issue that is exacerbated specifically by lead poisoning. And so this is the best, this is modeled off of the best and most successful effort to attack this that we can come across within codes from what we've seen within Rochester, and with their assistance and the incredible efforts that's been put into this by legal. Overall, we think that if we're not 100% there, then we're 98% there. You know, I think that we've made tremendous progress on it, but it's an issue that has to be addressed.
I just would go back. I would connect that point to the question I asked earlier, but we can call it. It can be a racial justice issue. It can be a health issue. It can be a crisis. It can be all of those things. It is, but if we don't plan appropriately and make realistic assessments of where we are and where we need to go, we will fail to change the status quo. And for instance, I've ridden this bull before, so it might be somewhat insincere when I ask, what's the number of interior inspections that we do? While I don't have the number memorized, I know that the number of interior inspections that we do is a far cry from the nearly 10,000 rental units that we have, because we have over 9,000 rental units. We do 3,000 rental registries. In theory, they all have inspections, but the vast majority are exterior, because we don't, like, there's a drop off and people who sign off. I think the vast majority don't allow people. I think I'm one of the few people who signs off and wants people to come in and look at the house. But I think many don't. So all the people who don't consent, none of them are getting interior inspections. So we're like sort of ignoring that. So then when we say, oh yes, we are doing X number of interior inspections right now, which is a very, 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 very small fraction of the over 9,000 units, 10 minutes per that is such a minuscule number. Of course, we can handle it even within our broken system, but it doesn't fix the fact that everything is broken and we're not actually inspecting most of them. So it's almost like our answer of yes, we have capacity is dependent on our continued failure as a system. So that's, I do ask the question sincerely, but I also sort of know where they're going. And that's my fear right there, is that we have, if we were to really do, I just don't think we're ever going to, I don't know what the strategy is that gets us into those properties that we're not currently getting into.
Patrick, do you want to talk about how we've worked within this ordinance so that from what we discussed on the administrative side around if we're able to get invited in, one if we're in from the because we have to be, or two if we're invited in by a tenant, how we're able to then look at whether or not we get into another unit within the building.
Sure thing. Just pulling up my notes. So the way
the discussion almost has to be flavored by how often do we get in, how often are we invited in, how often do we get in a different way, and what's the level of effort that corresponds to getting in a different way, and then building on getting in a different way. I'm sure we're doing the things that make sense, like hiring the quadrant people to be liaisons, to help get buy-in from tenants, to help connect relationships with landlords. I think those things make sense, but it still may be a high degree of effort for, let's even call it dramatic change. Like, let's say we improve by 50%, but if we only are doing 200 interior inspections to start, now we're doing 300 out of over 9,000. So is that success, or is that the maintenance of the broken, unjust status quo? Patrick, if your answer addresses that, go for it.
That's a lot to cover. Just regarding the ordinance itself, there's three primary mechanisms by which the city can perform an inspection. There are inspections performed as a part of the application for a certificate of compliance, inspections performed as part of an application for a rental registry certificate, and then also inspections performed based upon the filing of a complaint. So the complaint is a mechanism by which a resident, a tenant, can invite the city within their unit to do an inspection. And that by making a complaint to codes, this triggers an inspection. There is a general concern we've heard from the public regarding if a complaint is made, it only addresses that single unit. That is by and large correct, because there is legal ramification. We cannot go into a unit we do not have permission to go into. That's just a legal, we can't do that. But regarding those units, let's say it's a multi-unit complex or a 2-unit apartment, codes can, we're thinking it's more of a implementation, more of a codes itself can reach out to the other apartment if they're doing an inspection and ask for permission. If lead's found, we can try and indicate to the tenant that lead was found in another unit and recommend them getting an inspection. There are means by which we're hoping to be able to get into people's apartments, but ultimately, the city itself has very limited means by which we can go into an apartment without the consent of either the landlord or the tenant. But regarding, in general terms, the other two methodologies, the effectiveness certainly in question, but in a perfect world, for a certificate of compliance, those inspections are performed every 3 or 5 years. Regarding the rental registry, those are to be renewed every 2 years. So each unit, all those units should be inspected in accordance with this ordinance. It would be incorporated into those inspections.
Just that certificates of compliance, we've gone over this in the past, and we say every 3 to 5 years, and I think the state standard is every 3. We aim for every 5. We failed to do all the units that meet the certificate of compliance thing every 5 years, at least the last time we talked about it. So I don't know. And then one thing I would layer onto all this, let's pretend we go from doing 200 again interior inspections to 300 or even 400. Like, how many of those new 200 actually had lead problems? Probably a low number, because the ones that have lead issues are probably going to be the most non-compliant and least forthcoming. That's my worry, is that the ones we're going to be moving metrics, but they're not actually going to be translating to the change that overcomes the injustice, so to speak.
I think that's a fair point, Counselor. But again, that goes kind of beyond the legal of the ordinance itself.
I agree with that. So I'll echo Counselor Driscoll earlier saying this is the beginning of a bridge, even though I wish it wasn't the beginning of the bridge. I wish we were a little further, but I agree that's where we're at. We're going to need to do a lot of work to actually cross the bridge. So thank you for at least acknowledging that, Counselor Driscoll.
That can be answered on this call.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Allen. Michael, I am taking by all this, by everything that's been said today, that the 2 new inspectors we're hiring, they're going to be the lead people, right?
So it's not that they themselves would be lead inspectors. It's that the additional work would mean that we would need a total of 2 inspectors, because each inspector would be part of their regular work. And so that's why we've budgeted for the 2 more.
Okay. Well, how many people will be assigned to this?
Every housing inspector, this would be part of their regular work.
So you wouldn't put 2 inspectors into one of those high priority areas that have been specifically trained? I mean, you're 2 high draft picks. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I totally understand. So the training on this is such that it's a very simple thing to do. So we don't once the training's done, we don't need the absolute most technically competent housing inspectors to be doing this particular work. What we will find is that the housing inspectors that are assigned to the geographic areas that have the largest portions of the NRSA are the ones that, of course, would end up be doing the majority of the work, of the tests.
I think what Councilor Rudd, Councilor Green, and certainly Councilor Driscoll and Councilor Allen, the whole Common Council, President Hudson, we're going to put a lot of faith in the codes department to do this correctly.
Understood.
That's why I am emphasizing that we would want our best people taking care of those high priority areas. So
So
just to make sure this gets through.
yeah, so Counselor, to that point, if we, what happens is if we assign this to specific inspectors, then when an inspector's out and then they are and they're doing another inspection, they then need to make a second appointment for the other inspector to be able to come out and do this, as opposed to working it into the regular work. So that would reduce the number that we would be able to perform if we were to do it that way.
Okay, Counselor, Mr. Collins, I will yield to you and your expertise here. I just know you know how important this is to us.
I am absolutely, and I'm hearing the message loud and clear.
Thank you, Michael.
Counselor Allen, this is Nader. Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael, can you please tell me the status of the utilization of the tablets? And I ask that in the context that 10 years ago, we were told that this would save time. And to Counselor Rudd's point, part of his point, I get it in terms of not being able to be, not being invited into houses, but from a timing standpoint that you were referencing and having your workforce being able to be more efficient. The intent 10 years ago was to utilize the tablets to save the time back and forth from the office, the nail and mail situation, just overall time and efficiency. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As we're all aware, that implementation did not happen the way that it should have. Frankly, this is one of the things that COVID forced the issue on in a positive way. So with the code inspector's ability to do their work while being remote, forced them to all be on the tablet, where some were and some weren't before. Many were not before. So there's a few things that we're still trying to be able to find the right measure for indicating what that usage looks like, because there's a lot of times that it's used in the field, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right place or even the original place that a ticket would have been issued out of. And that previously been thought that was a measure, and it's not. But we do know that it increased dramatically over the course of the time that we were all out. I say we were all out because codes came back June 22nd. So all inspectors were using them in the field. Additionally, they also now have, through Camino, they've got the ability to do, the permanent inspectors have had the ability to do remote inspections, and that is being transferred over to the code inspectors as well. So that from a desk, so separate from the tablets, from a desktop or laptop, they can send someone a link on their phone and be able to do an inspection that way. So we're again continuing to decrease the barriers to being able to be efficient with the work.
Just as a follow-up, if I may, so the tablet intent was to be able to utilize them for the inspection and generate the correspondence, corresponding correspondence to the office to automatically send out the mail portion, and that they were going to be able to print off in their vehicle the initial mail portion and save.
Hey, sorry, can someone hit mute? I can't hear the auditor. Someone's unmute. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry, Nader. There's the wind was blowing. I couldn't hear you.
Was the British SAS, I think.
So the intent, as I said, was to have the tablets and the printing capability. So when they did an inspection, they were able to do the nail portion immediately and send to the office server, which would then be generated, printed out, and sent overnight to complete the nail and mail portion of that. That was what was promised 10 years ago. And the idea was obviously to cut the time and improve the efficiency, but it was also to eliminate the lost time. In both these cases, efficiency, to address Councilor Rudd's question, part of his question, to eliminate the back and forth and the delay of trying to get to the office, park, to go, or having to come in the morning, that their assignments would be readily available. They could go right to the sites that they were designated. Is that in place today?
It's so before COVID, it wasn't too much in place. Since then, it is largely in place. And when I say largely, there's two things. And one is some of the staff are still going to be not using it as fully as they should be. But overall, the implementation has been significantly better and I think close to where we need to be. The other is that we do have a software issue. And that software issue is something I'm still wrapping my brain around. But what you see in the field and what is in the system do not always match. And the example that Jake DeShaw uses is that City Hall Commons, our mailing address is East Washington. Within the system, the parcel address is East Genesee Street. And you're not going to know that when you're in the field. So that's where there's some inefficiencies due to just the capacity that the software currently has. So what I would say is that we've come a significantly long way in the past 3 months. And one of the things that Jake is going to be focusing on as he's taken over is how to get the rest of the way there efficiently. And some of that we've got control over, and frankly, some of it we don't, such as that address issue.
So essentially, if I may, to Councilor Green's point, this is retrospective, albeit 10 years. And please don't misunderstand, this is not a criticism of you. I'm not intending that. I'm just trying to understand where we're at and where we aren't. So if this is the type of thing I think Councilor Green is saying to all of us, that less of the retrospective, work with the council to get these things done. Secondarily, relative to the parcels and the address, it's also very, I think it would be helpful if there's some communication with the assessment office because they have the parcel information accurate. So whether or not that's communicating with what you all have in the software is one thing. But clearly, and the third thing I would say is when this concept of the tablet was first introduced, I specifically asked, and Councilor Hudson could attest to this, President Hudson, I asked what the training was going to be so that people had the training and there wasn't going to be this retrospective view 10 years later telling us that the software isn't good, people are not utilizing it, and we don't have printers that work, et cetera, et cetera. You get my point. I think if Jake and you and the new team, this is the kind of thing that you need to put in place, then you can begin to get at the point that Councilor Rudd is raising relative to the numbers that we want to get to, albeit the issues that we're going to have to contend with on people inviting us in to do it. But when you start to increase the workload and the accomplishments beyond 200 or 300 a year, and you get to where people are finding that it's been satisfactory from the inspection and a value added to that landowner or building owner, then the message will be sent that this is a positive, not something that people have to get defensive and argumentative about. That's my
understood. Good points. I can say that all inspectors have been fully trained on the technology, and I'll look into the assessment component of that. That's been explored in ways that I still am learning. But all good points. Thanks. And to your point, and to everyone, I've been here 4 months. I'm not taking any of this personally. I'm not. So
Oh, I know you
appreciate the
don't.
concern, but yeah,
I know you don't.
nothing to worry about with me.
I've known you too long. Thank you, Counselor Allen.
Thank you, Nader.
Good luck with your other items, Counselor Allen. I think you'll need at least the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got a few minutes, and I got 5% of my battery, so we gotta make this quick. Commissioner Collins, you want to go ahead with your other items?
But we'll see if we can leave 1% on when you're done here. So yes, as efficiently as possible. We've got 3 things. One is the agreement to, and I'm just going to go through this in the order in which you received it. An agreement to be able to sell 917, 919 Midland Ave to the land bank. This is a property that has the Kwanzaa Garden on it. The Kwanzaa Garden has been maintained by TNT. TNT has an agreement with the land bank where they maintain the adjacent lots. And so they would formalize with the land bank an agreement to wrap in the maintenance of the community garden that they've already been doing once land bank's got this property as well. Any questions on that?
So the land bank would, they're not going to charge TNT anything for the maintenance?
This would I don't know what their current agreement is. My understanding is this simply wraps into what their current agreement is with the Southside TNT.
Okay.
And I can't imagine there would be a charge because it's TNT that is actually doing the maintenance. So I can't imagine they would be charging them for the privilege of doing the work. Basically, is what it is.
Okay, as long as, so the land bank will just continue the ownership of it, and it's like the lease.
Correct.
Or so.
That's what I was gonna ask. So the land bank owns it, Michael, or does the city own it?
We own it. So what we want to do is sell it to the land bank for $1, so that they can have this, since TNT, Southside TNT is already doing the adjacent lot and doing this, it packages it all together.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just trying to figure out who owns it because right now it's the city owned. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Go ahead to your next one.
Okay, so next one is the annual agreement with the land bank. So this is as within the budget that was approved by the council for $500,000. And with the exception of the fact that it's last year was at 750, so we're down to 500, and the outcomes were adjusted similarly. Is otherwise, with the exception of just catching a typo here or there and updating some contacts, is the same as the ones that you've approved previously.
Okay, I think we probably will have to have further discussion on that one.
Okay.
With the land bank, with Caitlin on the line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We happy to set that up.
Is Caitlin on the line now?
Caitlin is not on the line right now.
Yeah, so we definitely need to set something up to have a discussion with her on the line.
Okay. Happy to do that.
Okay.
And I'll coordinate that with you. And then the last one was just an update. At the last month's meeting, the committee came to agreement that TNT, while they had requested a payment in full of $80,000, a single payment, that we would actually pay them in 4 quarterly payments. I'm not sure why, but for some reason that didn't end up on the council agenda. So the original letter had come from Tina from TNT. So this time around, we're doing a letter from me that simply restates what we had all agreed to last time.
Okay, so this one is just, you changed it to 4 payments?
Yeah, so what we've says At its July 13, 2020 meeting, TNT to be paid in 4 equal quarterly payments, $20,000 for the 2021 fiscal year. Funds will be used to support TNT's work in the following ways. $40,000 to be dispersed in the amount of $5,000 per sector for 8 special projects, as well as $40,000 to be used for operational expenses, including but not limited to insurance, employee payroll, that stuff.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Was that your last one?
That is the last one.
Okay. So what I'll do with the lead and the land bank one, Jim, I'll send out an email with the committee members and the council, and then I think we'll decide moving forward on those 2, but the other ones are ready to go on the agenda.
Okay, so you're not going to put it on the agenda and hold it. You're just going to leave it off the agenda.
I just need about like 20 minutes to have a discussion, and I'll let you know before 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Counselor, I don't know if this was shared, but during the finance committee yesterday, we talked about the RAND anticipated bond that the city ended up not acting upon because the state aid covered the situation that they needed the RAND for, which sort of surprised some of us on the financial committee. We asked them that question yesterday. So why our financial situation remains dire, and I know that weighs heavily on all our minds, the administration decided not to act upon that, which, like I said, surprised some of us. So maybe we're not in as bad as fiscal shape as we thought we were going to be, at least as far as right now goes. So if that is one of the reasons you're need a conversation with the land bank, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Okay.
Councilor Allen, whichever items you decide to move forward, I'm comfortable. I'm a yes on whatever you're comfortable moving forward with. So.
All right, so if there's not any other questions or discussion, then we can go ahead and close this meeting out. So we're good. Okay.
Good.
I can't see everybody's face, so.
Yeah, good from Councilor Driscoll, Councilor Allen.
Okay. Joe, I'm you in a few minutes.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay.